right, we'll call the Plan Commission to order. It's Wednesday, April 15th. It's 6:35. This is a Zoom meeting due to the COVID-19, and we will have Lisa do roll call quick.
Brinkmeyer, Broom,
Hi. Hello.
Hickel, Ratcliffe,
Here.
Schultz,
Present.
Williams.
Here.
All right.
All right. Again, the public is certainly welcome to address and access this meeting through the agenda. There is a link for the Zoom meeting. They can access that through their computer, tablet, or their phone. They can also access just the audio version of this as well. And certainly welcome to do that. If they have questions or comments they want to make, they can do it. We'll have time at the beginning of the meeting. Otherwise, they can email the village clerk, Lisa. Her email is on the agenda. The meeting is being recorded, and a live feed is going through our public access channel on Charter, as well as on YouTube. Again, new technology, please be patient. We'll make sure that everybody gets their voice heard. And there is a chat feature in Zoom for those on the public as well. And we'll utilize that during the meeting if need be, and the staff will kind of keep track of that. That is also recorded as part of the meeting too. During the meeting, please, if you're not speaking, keep your mics on mute so that we can keep the quality of the sound as best we can. The commission members will be unmuted at all times unless
I think we lost John there for a moment.
Will it help if we all click on him, on his picture as fast as we can?
I think he's going to log out and log back in.
That's the first blip we've had, Matt, on these meetings.
Yeah.
Hey, Matt, while John's rejoining, maybe you can just walk us through a little bit of logistics with this. I've seen some of the commission meetings with different municipalities through Zoom.
Yeah.
How are we handling voting? I've seen different methodologies. What is Cottage Grove's? How do we motion? How do we vote through this so that it's clear what we're doing?
So when it's ready to vote, I would unmute yourself. If it's a topic that you can generally tell from discussion if it's going to be something that may or may not be unanimous. If it's something where it appears it's going to be unanimous, I think a voice vote has still been working okay. So we haven't been doing it exclusively by roll call. But if there's any confusion on a vote, we would certainly, I'm sure John would just ask Lisa to do a roll call, and we'd handle it that way.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. He's back.
And any member who isn't sure what the vote was or would like there to be a roll call can certainly ask for that if there's any voice vote that occurs.
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened. I think if you guys heard, I left it at that the agenda was properly posted, and we do have a quorum. So hopefully we'll be okay, and I won't touch anything. So we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I know Lisa has a flag behind her. I do as well, if I can do that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we'll start with the opportunity for public's opportunity to speak on any subject or not a subject on the agenda. Matt, have you seen anybody that's popped in the chat or anything like that? I don't see anybody on the video, at least.
I do not.
Okay.
If we notice someone, if the commission is not opposed to this, if we notice someone come in later that wants to speak, our goal here is to handle all comments at the beginning of the meeting, and not during the individual agenda items, because that could be cumbersome using this process. But if we notice someone come in, if the commission's okay with it, we could always move back up to public comment and hear that comment from the individual.
It's fine with me. All right, then we'll move on to item 5, then discuss and consider the meeting minutes from our meeting on March 11th. Any comments, questions, corrections?
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
We have a first and a second by Alex and Fred. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right, then we move on to item 6, is discuss and consider resolution 2020-02 regarding the consistency of the village proposed urban service area amendment with the Village of Cottage Grove comprehensive plan. Aaron, any comments on that? I know you have a memo and everything, and we do have the resolution.
Fairly straightforward. This is a necessary step that CARPC asks us to do, Capital Area Regional Plan Commission, as part of the application process, just to have the Plan Commission board verify that everything's in line with our comp plan. There's a couple of maps in the packet. The main area that we're really doing this for is the piece of TID 10. It's about 150 acres or so. We also noticed a small half-acre piece of the West Lawn subdivision that was overlooked last time we did this. We're tagging along to put that in as well. The CDA at the last meeting where they met reviewed the land use plan that Great Wolf put together for TID 10, and it was in line with the vision that they had developed in the process of doing their planning up in that area. So in my opinion, this is all consistent, and like I said, it's pretty straightforward and a necessary step that we have to do.
Okay, any questions or comments from the commission members?
What are we, Alex here. The last statement of the resolution is the Village Board of Trustees finds the amendment to be consistent. So is our motion that we're recommending approval and it gets moved to the trustees?
Yes.
Okay. I'll make that motion then. Motion to approve the resolution as presented and move to the Board of Trustees for final approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Alex and a second by Fred. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody oppose? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Great. Moving then on to item 7 is discuss a request from Tim Olson to amend the Village of Cottage Grove Comprehensive Plan to change parcels 0711-174-8500-3 and 0711-174-9002-4, totaling 72 acres for future development area to planned neighborhood. And this is for feedback only, no formal action to be taken. Aaron, do you want
We've
to?
been looking at this the last few meetings. The map that's part of the staff report is the same as what we saw last time around. What's new is the text that's in the staff report. Essentially, we would be taking the existing text in the comp plan for this particular plan neighborhood out, replacing it with the text that's in the staff report. It's a slightly larger area. The new portion of this neighborhood is a little bit further removed from Vilas and probably is less suited for higher density developments. So we decreased the number of multifamily units, or the percentage anyway, from 20% to 10%. It may still end up being around the same number of units, just we're envisioning the multifamily in the part that's already in the comp plan. We talk a little bit about how to handle the open spaces, the wetlands and slopes. Talk about the importance of bringing the glacial drumlin trail through when the village completes their part. And these are all things that the property owner, Tim Olson, is on board with doing. And then just a note that the road network that's shown is a suggestion. It could be altered as the neighborhood goes through more extensive design and engineering. But we do want to make sure we have at least 3 entrances in. Right now we're showing 2 from Vilas and 1 from Coffeetown. So basically just looking to make sure this is still in line with what everybody's thinking for putting in the comp plan, and this would probably be the last time we need to look at this unless it needs some changes before we actually go to make an amendment.
Any questions or discussions from the commission? Aaron, I think this is certainly much better than what was initially proposed way back when, which is essentially one entrance into that area, and trying to figure out how to make sure that emergency vehicles could, turn around and everything else. So this is for the developer a much better idea and plan and use for that area. And certainly with the bike path coming through, that would be wonderful to come off of that and see a nice brand new neighborhood and then into Bakken Park. So hopefully they move forward with it.
Aaron, a few years ago, this area was, I know White and Olson was part of a urban service area amendment. Is this larger area all part of it, part of our urban service, or is there any necessary approvals there?
There would have to be a further approval. Let me see if I can share the map here. Not sure if you're seeing this or not.
We are, it looks good.
Yeah, we see it.
So the eastern portion is already in the urban service area. This newer western portion is not. So that would be a subsequent piece of the puzzle they would have to accomplish before it actually develops.
Okay.
Any other questions for Aaron regarding this? All right. No action from the commission. Is just keeping us informed. So thank you, Aaron. Next agenda item then is to discuss the comprehensive plan future use designation for lots 86, 87, and 88 of North Lawn Estates, first edition. And again, this is feedback only, no formal action to be taken. So, Aaron?
Yeah, so here we're specifically talking about the 3 1-acre parcels that Hamburg currently owns immediately north of the Stop and Go along N. Moving Out is actually looking at these parcels now. The BB site they were looking at last year kind of fell through. So after looking at a few different sites in the village, this is the one that seems to be most promising for them. But currently it's shown in the comp plan as planned business. So for them to do that sort of project, or for anybody to do a project here involving multifamily, there would have to be a comp plan change. Probably the best way to do it would be to make it part of the planned mixed use neighborhood to the north. Kind of includes the Cottage Grove Commons project and the land to the south. So basically we're looking for feedback at this point, just whether you think that's a good idea, whether this is a good spot for that project specifically, or really just any mixed use project that could go in there.
Aaron, we don't know if they're still planning on putting, say, a commercial component or some sort of component within that building. I know they were talking about
even
that
on
for BB.
it was kind of their preference that they didn't really want to. I think they were willing to do it because it was part of the comp plan. I guess it's kind of up to us what we want there. If we make that a requirement, then they would have to find a way to accomplish that, or I guess not do the project. But generally they're multifamily residential developers more so than commercial developers.
Yeah, but they do have a number of properties. When they came last time, that they said they do have commercial components or a mixed use component. I'm just thinking of that, having a main thoroughfare there with essentially Main Street, and the opportunity to have a commercial or a mixed use type of building there. It's always a challenge, certainly, to just get straight commercial, I think, these days. But with Cottage Grove Commons putting in their spot, it might look a bit more consistent as you're coming up there. Plus, you've got the BP rate there. So again, from that perspective, it might be. I don't know if they're still willing to do that or whatever, but that's just a consideration, I think.
It's worth noting that this property is in TIF District number 5. They haven't brought up at this property, they haven't discussed with us any incentives, but if it was the desire of the Plan Commission and the board to have the mixed use component, that would certainly make sense if there were incentive provided to help out, that would be something worth incentivizing for.
That could make it a little more palatable for the surrounding neighborhood too, that they would have some kind of amenity, some kind of business going in there that would provide benefit to them more so than just a straight multifamily building would. Unlike BB, this is kind of surrounded by multifamily and duplex to a greater degree anyway, but
I don't know. I liked it as planned business, I guess, like the restaurant concepts, a lot of the concepts that have been proposed. Obviously, none of them came to fruition, and that's just how that goes sometimes. I always kind of liked that idea. I never really thought of these pieces of land for living spaces, but I guess it is kind of working just to the north there, where it's mixed use, right? The first floor has commercial occupancy. I guess there's potential there, but right now I'm not seeing a big need to change what our plans have been.
I don't want to see it changed. I think it should stay planned business. I mean, I live in this neighborhood, so, or close.
Yeah, there is like I said, the gas station right there next to those lots as well. So I don't know how you blend that in without
Well,
having
it's
some sort of,
directly across from UW Health, correct?
yes.
I mean, that's a perfect place for some kind of business. Ideally, I think like a restaurant or something. So, I mean, you've got Vinny's is right down the road, and so is Landmark. I mean, give them another place to go.
Any other comments or questions from the commission members? Aaron, I don't know if you have any, is that enough direction? It sounds like we have at least one member saying keep it as is. And I'd certainly be more lean towards at least some sort of business there, because it is on a main thoroughfare. But I can see that this nothing's been placed there either, so that's the other struggle we have. But it is a very visible spot for, at some point, a business.
I guess, do you want them to go through the next step of coming back with some kind of concept?
I would like to just see what they come up with if they do have a commercial component in it. Well, I can kind of understand having it. I can kind of understand the point about keeping it as just business. Like, that's what we wanted to go there, but nothing has gone there forever. So I think actually seeing what they might come up with, if there is some commercial in there, I think is a good thing. Let's see what they come up with. And it is by other multifamily housing, so it's not really out of space. And as far as the businesses like UW Health and Benny's and Landmark, the bike path is gonna go through there and connect to the other restaurants like BB Jack's and Culver's and Jimmy John's, and so there are businesses that are already right there. So I'd be interested in just seeing more at this point.
Well, my only comment to that would be they don't have to ever develop the commercial aspect of it. So you could end up with a, apartment type building or condos, and the 5,000 square feet of office space never gets developed.
Any other comments from commission members?
It's not really in their business model, the particular group for mixed use for with the business and stuff. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think we should encourage people to look at Cottage Grove and come up with different options that maybe are not directly in alignment with the plan. And I think we should do those types of things. But I also think we kind of know what we want there as well, and businesses definitely helps that corridor. So I don't know that they're actually going to come up with a proposal with commercial, but it's up to them if they want to propose something. But I think we should still keep it planned business.
Kyle, you have any thoughts on this?
I'd be open to looking at the plans. It's kind of hard to visualize without kind of seeing what they're looking for. But I mean, if it's more than a 4-family, that actually falls under commercial type development. So when we say commercial development, it's kind of loose.
I think it's planned business, right, Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, I guess as far as building codes and things, that's certainly correct that the larger multifamilies count as commercial in that aspect. We're kind of talking about it more in the way the comp plan uses the terms, and having office or retail as a component would be sort of commercial we're talking about including.
Aaron, do you know how many units are they talking about? 100 units? Is that about right?
they haven't given a number yet. They're just kind of interested in the site and trying to see if we're even amenable to them having residential there.
But the BB Sandpiper site, wasn't that about 110 units or something like that, if my memory serves me right?
Yeah, I think that was about 100 or so. I want to say that was maybe 5 acres. This is 3, so it might be a little bit less. It's narrower, so they'd have to, not quite sure how the parking would work. They might have to do underground parking here.
It sounds like they have a lot of things to be considering then, if they wanted to pursue that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can just give them the feedback that it's kind of a mixed reaction, and we have some folks that aren't sold on it, and it's kind of up to them then if they want to spend some time drawing something up or not.
I think that's what we're coming out of this with. All right. Any other comments, or we'll move on to the next agenda item? All right. Next item is to discuss the potential of zoning ordinance for amendments related to conditional use permits for feedback only. There, Aaron, I think this is you again.
It is. So we started talking about this last time. We had the large list in here with various recommendations for different uses that were in the ordinance as conditional uses now. I think you guys had wanted to spend a little more time looking through that. So I don't know if we want to go through that list first, if anyone had some additional comments after spending a little more time with it.
Aaron, might be just good to run through the list as you have in the memo.
Yeah, so this would actually be the list from the last meeting. So there were some districts where duplexes, twin houses, that sort of thing were conditional uses. The proposal was to possibly change those to being permitted by right. Those wouldn't be in single family, they would be some of the other residential districts. Multiplex apartments, 3 to 4 units or 5 to 8 units are conditional uses in some districts. Right now, most apartment buildings get done as a planned unit development. So there's a few ways we could handle this. That could be an overlay for larger apartment buildings, but maybe some of these smaller ones could be permitted by right. For the institutional uses, we talked about indoor, outdoor institutional uses becoming an overlay district. Just trying to pick out the ones that are maybe a little bit less straightforward. Right now, in-vehicle sales and service is a conditional use. That's things like drive-throughs mostly. In most cases, those are pretty straightforward. We may just want to say those are permitted by right. Same with indoor commercial entertainment, things like bars and restaurants. Right now, in some cases, are conditional uses. We may want to make that permitted by right. Commercial indoor lodging, things like hotels, motels are currently a conditional use. The 2 that we have in the pipeline now are being done as planned unit developments just because of the size of the buildings, and that's probably how most of those will end up getting handled. But we could consider an overlay district for those. The storage and disposal land uses, we don't really have a lot of those within the village limits, but that could be something that becomes an overlay district as opposed to a conditional use. Same with some of these transportation uses like off-site parking lots, airport, freight terminal.
And the whole goal is obviously to reduce the lists and shift more to controlling this through zoning, right?
Right. So the things that stay as conditional uses, we want to make sure we have clear, measurable criteria that we can apply to an application. Because again, with the state law change, we're kind of obligated to approve a conditional use request unless we can really prove that it can't meet the criteria that are in the ordinance. So moving things to overlay districts would be kind of a different way of getting around that. It would be more of a choice that the Plan Commission board can make whether to approve that or not. They don't have the same obligation built into the state statutes. So the new staff report, the April 15th staff report, looks at some of these uses that we recommended staying as conditional uses. One was commercial animal boarding, kind of a doggy daycare or overnight boarding type functions. So when looking for some criteria that we could apply to that, I was looking through the state statutes, and I was kind of surprised that those facilities aren't licensed by the state. A lot of similar uses are things like breeders and shelters. So for the purpose of our ordinance, you may want to pull some of those licensed facilities out as different uses. So the animal control facility, animal shelter, dog breeding facility. And in those cases, we would just reference the state statutes, which are very thorough and have requirements for how much area each animal gets, how they get cared for, how they get transported, how often they get examined by vets, and all these things. So I think just referencing the state statutes for those uses would be would kind of cover all of those factors, because if they're licensed, then they've been verified that they're meeting all of those things. As far as the doggy daycare type uses, I think we might have to do a little more research. What's best practices if they're not licensed and we can't refer to any of these state criteria. We would have to write up our own if we're going to keep them as a conditional use. So things like, again, how many animals can you have for a given square footage, both inside and outside? What are the hours? What kind of fencing do they have to have? That kind of thing.
No, Aaron, I'm assuming we're kind of blazing a trail. I think we talked about a little bit, so we don't have a lot to leverage from other communities in this area.
Yeah, we may be able to find some ordinances that have addressed this differently than we have in the past. But yeah, as far as doing a lot of rearranging and taking things out of conditional uses, I don't think there's been a lot of that that's happened in other communities yet.
Yeah, Larry, you have any comments on this? I know you and Aaron have been talking about this for a while.
Yeah, to be honest with you, we've somewhat limited our discussion on this as of recently because of all else that's been going on. But I guess my comments are similar to Aaron's in that, it's really about trying to figure out how to limit the use of the use of this tool, conditional use permit tool, and where we do so, make sure that we've got the standards in place that are necessary to sort of match expectations with what we can actually accomplish at the village. But that's just general at this point. I think it's on any of the specifics, I guess I would take the lead from the village planner and the plan commission.
Right, Aaron. As far as I'm concerned, you're heading down the right path on this. I mean, these are everything in the memo is very reasonable as far as the approach and everything. So, and I think from my perspective, and I won't speak for the other commission members, but I would say continue moving forward with this.
Some of these are a little bit more straightforward. Bed and breakfast, again, are licensed
Right.
by the state. They have very specific criteria that they have to follow if they're being licensed. So again, we can just kind of refer to that state licensing process. We've talked a little bit before, about a year or so ago, about tourist rooming houses, which is kind of a statute term for Airbnb type rooms. We probably want to make that a separate element of our ordinance now. Payday lenders, again, are very well defined by the state statutes as to what kind of limitations you can put on them. And I think the criteria that we have now meets what's in the statutes. And maybe a question for Larry. The state statute does say you can be more strict than what's in the statute as far as how far apart these kind of facilities have to be or where they can be located relative to a residential district. I guess what I'm not sure is, can you be so strict that you get rid of them altogether?
It's always a fine line, right? I mean, clearly, if you created a distance that exceeds the width of the village, sometimes it's good to look at these in the extreme. I think that, there would be maybe some room for challenge there. And there's a number of things here on this list. When we talked, Aaron mentioned tourist rooming houses. There's a different set of criteria that apply specifically to a number of these uses that we'll have to incorporate and make sure we're on the right side of in whatever you decide to do with these. But that's an example of, yes, I think if we went too far and used that basically as a way to prohibit them, that we could be subject to a challenge.
Okay. The remainder ones, migrant labor camps, are referenced in state statutes. There's kind of a interesting history, if you follow the link, that I didn't really know that much about prior to reading that. I don't think this is something that's going to pop up in the village at this point if we don't have one already, but I think just leaving it within the rural holding district as we have it is probably fine. We have a portion in our ordinance that talks about communication towers, and those are conditional uses in some areas. A few years ago, the cell phone companies kind of lobbied the state legislature and got themselves removed from a lot of municipal oversight. So I think we probably need to pull that out as a separate use with a different kind of criteria than we might have for other types of towers, like a radio tower or something like that. And the last one on the list was daycares. Those are also licensed by the state and would have requirements that we can reference within our ordinance. So I think the next step would be to kind of stop talking about these generally and start actually writing up what the proposed ordinance change would look like with the actual text and where it would go within the ordinance.
That's what I would say. Anyone else have any comments regarding Aaron's kind of next step on this? Otherwise, I think Commission's fully supportive of you continue down this path, I believe, unless somebody wants to speak up otherwise.
I'll just say that I really appreciate your work on this, Aaron. And from what I see, it all looks like good stuff. So keep it up.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, Aaron. Then we'll move on to item 10 is discuss an invitation from the city of Madison to discuss a potential boundary agreement between the city of Madison, the village of Cottage Grove, and the town of Cottage Grove. So this was kind of kicked around, I think maybe year or more ago. I know Melissa and I went to one meeting with the town and the city of Madison planners, and then they also came out and chatted with, I believe it was Public Works committee as well, if I remember right. But now it's back again. There's been an invite. Looks like Brian Grady also joined the Zoom as well, so he may want to chat about this too. But Aaron, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think this went quiet for a little while when there was a transition from Mayor Soglin to Mayor Rhodes Conway and City of Madison, and now it sounds like she's in support of having the city explore this agreement again. In your packet, you had a copy of the map that we got from the city staff. I think it's fairly similar to what they had presented last time we looked at this, especially in the areas around the village. There may have been some differences further south, it looks like, relative to McFarland, but that's a little bit, I think, outside our area of focus. So the blue dashed line on the map would be the proposed ultimate boundary line between the city and the village. And Brian, feel free to pop in if I'm not putting something correctly. I think most of that line makes sense. It kind of runs through the middle of wetlands and environmental corridors to the north of the village and to the southwest of the village. So I think that makes sense. The only concern I guess I might have about it is just right along BB. It might be nice to have some open space that gets preserved there, just to maintain some kind of, even though it might be very narrow, a little green rural boundary that kind of separates the city from the village, to kind of know when you're going from one to the other. And I think in terms of identity for the village, it's always been kind of important when you talk to residents that, this is kind of its own distinct area and not just, bleeding directly into Madison. So maybe along BB, we want to have some discussions about how that could be accomplished. And that could be where the town really becomes another key part of this deal. They have their transfer of development rights program. Maybe the areas along BB that we would want to preserve as open space become extra incentivized within their program. So there's still some development value there for the landowners, but they don't necessarily have to have it developed. Some of that property is already the cemetery, so that's going to stay green space. But I think that's, from the village's point of view, the main issue we might want to discuss with them. It sounds like the city and town have been discussing this as being a 40-year boundary agreement. I think in my experience, a lot of these are 20, but I think ultimately once you build out to this line, it kind of is where it is. Whether it's 20 or 40, it's probably going to be, I think both sides are kind of growing towards this already. So I think as long as it's at least 20, that should be fine. I think in terms of who's party to this agreement, I think it would be great if this involves us, the city, and the town. As I said, I think there's some role for them, especially in terms of transfer of development rights, and how that kind of coincides with both the city and village's land use plans. I guess that said, it doesn't necessarily have to include them. It's really defining the growth for the city and the village, and where they stop relative to each other. I think the other thing that's worth noting about this, if you look at the southern end of the town around 12 and 18, it looks like that area is proposed to stay in the town for the duration. I think if that is being shown as a development area for Madison and McFarland, that might be of concern to the village because it could be an area that becomes competitive with what we're trying to do up by the interstate. But if the stays is more of a town industrial park, they won't have the same utility infrastructure that we have, so it's kind of a different would attract a different type of business than we would have up in the park, and that could actually be a good thing to have both of those kinds of options in the community.
Aaron, do you could maybe Brian clarify what the area in the purple to the south represents, that area B?
Hey everyone, this is Brian Grady. I'm a principal planner of the city of Madison. Don't get your census form here. Fill that census form out as you see my background. But yeah, the purple, I think was it Larry, the area B that you were referencing?
Yes.
Sure. So yeah, that in that area, now I have to remember, I think in there we were going to include that, we were going to maintain that area B. We would include it if we reach an agreement, whether it's a two-party agreement or a three-party. We would keep area B in our comp plan, in our long-range kind of growth area, our future land use map. So we not pull it out of our comp plan map, but the blue line is a pretty firm line. And as I mentioned to Aaron a little bit ago, a few days ago, basically west of the blue line, the town would be very limited in the amount of development they can do. But then east of the blue line, we would not review subdivisions with our ETJ review that we have now. And so that area B would just basically be shown as a long-range growth area for the city. They would be maintained as a long-range growth area, but there would be no restrictions on town development. So it's kind of a bit of a hybrid area, I guess what you'd call it.
How does McFarland play into that? Is that, I think there was some kind of dispute between McFarland and Madison. I'm not sure how that got resolved.
Yep. So the kind of the odd-shaped property just north of where it says Village of McFarland, that kind of stair-step type property, we thought we had a pretty firm cooperative plan with the town of Blooming Grove. That property annexed to the Village of McFarland. The city sued them, and the judge sided on McFarland's favor, and so that property will likely stay in McFarland. The village has recently, this goes back maybe, I don't know, 6 months ago or so, they've annexed land into the town of Cottage Grove. It was the first time they did that. You can see the Village of McFarland owned property, the Lightfoot property. They've annexed those. At some point, we do pride ourselves in the city of Madison and having good relations with our adjacent municipalities. At some point soon, we hope to talk to the Village of McFarland staff to kind of learn more about their kind of goals for this area. But that's kind of been a recent development in terms of their expansion to the east there. And then, Aaron, I will mention, as you described previously, the blue line in terms of the northern part of this map. So the blue line, where probably it's more of a city of Madison, Village of Cottage Grove focus. We have not changed that blue line since we last conveyed that to the village. Your point about the open space area along BB trying to achieve sort of separation, we would be amenable to that. I think this was kind of a general framework that is kind of more detailed discussions can start from. So we would be open to something. We think we can make it work amongst the municipalities.
Yeah, sounds good. I wanted to let everybody know we were re-engaging in these discussions and running this by everyone for feedback and questions.
Thanks, Aaron. Has this been brought up to the town then?
Brian can clarify, but it sounds like the town and city have had conversations on and off. So I think they've probably seen this map too, I imagine. It's probably the next step would be to have a conversation with all three of us.
Okay.
Any other comments from commission members? I think my only comment would be that I think this is certainly worthwhile, at least to have the conversations to start with and see where it goes. But I look to all you to, for your thoughts as well.
Yes, John, kind of like everything. What's the benefit to Cottage Grove, right? So Aaron's memo is here, and there's a couple little sentences saying that, hey, here's the map. Let's take a look at this map. We've talked about this before, but from our perspective, what is our benefit? Eventually, and as the talks continue, that's kind of the things that I'm going to be listening for.
Yeah, I think one thing is just having a clear, obvious, defined boundary that makes it simple for each side to exercise their powers on each side of the line. Police aren't confused about, what's in the city and what's in the village, things like that. You don't have developers that are in the middle, kind of playing one side off the other. Who can I get the best deal from? Which can often happen in this kind of situation. Those are probably the two biggest ones. And just kind of preventing legal action one way or the other, for the duration of the agreement. Everybody is kind of agreeing to what that boundary is going to be ahead of time, and you're not, having these kind of fights about it later, like what Brian was talking about between Madison and McFarland.
Sure. I mean, I think that's all good stuff, and I think if we just put it on paper, make it clear, right? The next time you bring this up, and be like, hey, here's our benefits, bullet points. I think you're right. I mean, it's all good stuff. I'm not. Yeah. So that's just what I'm looking for, my perspective. Yeah.
Sure.
All right.
I'll add a little bit to that. There's defensive reasons and offensive reasons for benefit that a good boundary agreement benefits both sides. And I think that the best example of that is if you look back at that step-like looking parcel or parcels that the village of McFarland just annexed, or apparently is going to be able to be successful annexing. It helps each community to avoid those kinds of odd-shaped parcels coming in their direction from the other side, and at the same time, allows you to. That one is a glaring example, I think, of islands, peninsulas being pushed into in and around other communities. It makes it hard to provide services in the future and creates confusion in the public too. But the benefits go in both directions if the line is where it works for the community.
All right. Any other comments on the subject? Otherwise, Aaron, I think you got the go ahead. We keep moving forward and begin those planning on those discussions as we had done before. Looks like Melissa.
Yeah, I do have one thing. I know when we talked about this last time, it was at the village could just be do an agreement with Madison, that there aren't a lot of agreements that are three ways. And so I still have that concern about doing an agreement with the city of Madison, the town of Cottage Grove, and the village of Cottage Grove. I understand a little bit better why maybe we would do it with the town as well. However, I think it would have to be beneficial for the village as well to include the town in it then going forward. And if there would be a way to maybe get our streets connected as part of that, I think we should go for it. Just my 2 cents.
All right. Well, thank you for that. I think we go in this open-minded and certainly looking at all different avenues. And if it doesn't necessarily work for a three-way, then maybe we pursue a two-way. If it doesn't work for any of the parties, nobody agrees to it. But certainly, having the conversation, I think, is a good next step for everybody, and being open-minded about it. Any item 11 is then future agenda items. Matt or Aaron, I think we've got some stuff coming our way on the development front.
Yeah, I think both the hotel projects are still wanting to come in May for the next step of each of their respective approval processes. I think Ferris Auto will be coming in with their more specific site plan and building plans. And probably continuing some of these discussions, the conditional use permits, the comp plan amendment, and potentially more boundary agreement stuff. We'll see what the kind of schedule Madison and the town are thinking of as far as moving that forward.
Okay. Matt, anything else to add?
No, I think Aaron has it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well said then. Thank you both. All right, then we move on to item 12. Adjournment. Is there a motion?
Second.
We had a first and a second. Non-debatable. All those in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
You're
Thank
all
you. Have a great
Zoomers.
night.